Welcome to another episode of Startup Stories, the startup podcast that aims to motivate and challenge you through inspiring stories from entrepreneurs themselves. We chat with them about their journey, challenges, and experiences. My name is Rachel and I'm the host of Startup Stories. Our podcast today is a group discussion with 4 different entrepreneurs. I've got Axel Gekere from Adshot.
Hey, hi again actually.
En Merte van Clusity.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Niels Bosmans from Refact.
Hi.
And Jasper Strulens from Base Skis.
Hi, happy to be here.
Welcome. Today we're talking about international growth and sustainability amongst startups. We'll be focused on the one hand on how startups expand outside of Belgium or the local community and the reasons and strategies. And on the other hand, we'll also touch on how these growing startups can contribute to the environment. I've spoken to each of you individually already, and listeners can listen to those interviews on previous episodes this season. So from that, Jasper, to start us off, I was interested because you said in the long run, everyone will have to go circular, obviously, if they want to build a sustainable brand due to the limited resources we have in the world. How do you see this impacting startups and people with general entrepreneurial ambitions?
Well, we will be forced in one way or another, either financially or physically. If steel prices go up because the mines are depleted, we will not be able to afford it anymore. And definitely as a startup, you won't have the resources to buy mines or anything like that, right? Mm-hmm. So I think at one point or another in the future, we'll be forced to go that way, and, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think it will drive innovation and will drive creativity. And, I think lots of good stuff will come out of that.
Yeah. Niels, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, indeed. I think it will create more opportunities for startups because the problems will be so big. And I acknowledge what Jasper says. At some point, we will have a resource scarcity. Mm-hmm. We will have problems with our supply chain, or our global supply chain. And when that happens, you see all kinds of new things emerging. When we had this summer, the Rhine was, I think, totally dry. We had a lot of supply chain problems, and I guess that meant that a lot of local businesses had opportunities. Mm-hmm. Because people needed to, or companies needed to switch suppliers and needed to source them locally because they couldn't be supplied anymore by their normal suppliers. So definitely it will create opportunities, but you have to be creative because it will not be business as usual or the normal supply chains that you will be able to use.
Yeah. And Axel, you mentioned also, staying lean and flexible. I hear, you're having to change to circumstances, which you've also had to do. And that's key to your company. How do you see that in other startups as well? Is that a general thing for all startups, or do you still see differences?
Is it compared to the environment issues or just in general?
No, sorry, saying flexible and lean in general, not necessarily.
Yeah, I think the most methodologies that have been in place even for a multitude of years since the word startup got, let's say, a bit more famous. I think the foundations of it still remain in place, like being lean and mean, like you don't have to fully develop a product before you can actually test it. You don't even have to develop anything at all in some cases if you're talking about tech to test it. I even think with physical products that might be the case. You can capture feedback before you actually start to build something, and if it's not a good idea, kill it. And I think this also leads to disruption because you just have a big challenge, you start talking with relevant people, like in your case for example, and then for example if we talk about circular economy, then disruption will arrive because you can act lean and mean as a startup, which other companies and the big companies are being more like oil tankers and they're finding it more difficult to do so. So in that sense, I think that will be also for the environment thing that startups who work that way will actually be the disruptor of that industry.
Yeah. And how is Clusity staying lean and flexible to changing environment?
Yeah, we're of course still a startup, so it's quite easy to be flexible. But I think one of the main things we do, and that we also see in companies who are on the similar path of social innovation, for example, is that we try to combine the social aspect, the sustainability aspect. We're working on diversity in the technology sector so that the solutions in technology that are being made can cover the entirety of society, have a lot of touch points with the actual problems we have today, so we can provide relevant solutions for those problems. And we're a community trying to get the people into those roles that they can actually solve those problems. One of the things we try to do is to be self-sustaining also financially, because I think like any business with the problems we have, like you said before, there will be a scarcity, there will be a lot of business opportunities, but it's also something that I think a business that's purely for profit and doesn't make any impact or doesn't solve any problem will not survive. And I think for us that's very clear, and we're making a social impact, and then the business model comes. And I think that's something a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs will have to do in the future, that we try to find a way now to do so, that social impact always comes first before profit, but still trying to survive financially. So it's a tough balance, and we're still searching, of course, for it, but so far we're managing to just keep the two things, the two goals in front of us.
Yeah, okay.
Again, just to add a bit to that maybe, but also because indeed for some companies it's easier than for others to find what their positive contribution to society is. For example, we're a digital marketing agency, but even then, from the beginning, I think the main goal was actually the first goal, and the main goal was to have influencers or content creators to turn their hobbies into a full-time profession so that they can really enjoy it, and people who watch it enjoy it even more because they can work on it full-time. So even for us, we kind of had that reflex to, okay, how will this, what we do, actually impact, of course, a niche in society, but also society because they're artists in a sense. So,
yeah.
So I can vouch that it's important to have that kind of idea of what the impact should be, and every company should have it. That how are we going to contribute to society or environment or something like that.
All right. And you just mentioned it, and being in a niche. And Jasper and Niels, you also mentioned like sitting in a niche, whether it's from gaming, machinery, skis. Is that a trend? Because it's something that surprises me with, you know, globalization, online reach, that we're actually going from this large audience to something actually looking for the smaller areas where we can have a bigger impact. Is that also a trend that you're seeing in your environment?
I think business-wise it's just what you need to do. If you try to aim for a large audience, probably that large audience is already covered by other solutions at other companies. So you need to find that target customer that really feels the pain or can really benefit from the gain of your product. And that certainly is a niche, because you cannot find a big general audience that has this big pain. It will already be solved. So yeah, I think it's what every company also in history witnessed. I don't think it's really a trend. It's how most companies start, with really one big problem and a very small target group.
Maybe I can add something to that, because I once got a very nice metaphor from someone I came across, who said that like trying to solve everything for everyone is like throwing like 6 or 7 tennis balls towards someone. The chance that they catch one is very small, whilst if you have one message and one problem you solve for one specific group, and like you solve a pain that's really relevant to them, you just throw one ball, and the chance that they catch that ball is larger than if you just throw a lot of balls at the same time. So I think it's kind of similar to that, and of course it's something from all of time, but it's also something I think through learning more about how to do business, how to do sales. Nowadays with the internet, it's a lot easier. It's just easier to target audiences, so you can have a niche audience that's all over the world, for example.
Yeah, I think that's easier, and maybe that's the trend. Maybe you see, because indeed, with the internet, you can take a global audience in a very niche market much easier than it used to be. Yeah.
Yeah, focus your resources, like your financial resources. So I think it's both a marketing thing, like the niche, but also for us in hardware, it is very, very hard to compete, let's say, with Mercedes or really big brands or that have really big budgets for R&D, which we cannot compete with. So all of these robots and automation lines, we can just not install them. So we really have to focus on one little problem and do that really well with a limited budget that we have. And I think in marketing, it's sort of similar.
Yeah, I think both are always needed for any kind of startup. Your budget is limited and your resources for the product, service, whatever is limited. So if you then choose a global audience or try to cover the whole world, they will not make any noise whatsoever. So.
It resonates what you said, Niels, about being, customized to the client, because you can't compete in price to competitors, for example.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Indeed. You have to really solve their issue, which the general products don't solve.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Also, from what you just said, using online, the results of using the internet and social media internationally were very different, from diversification through inclusivity to local impact with AdShop, for example. But I'm wondering then, how as an entrepreneur, how do you determine where the biggest value lies for you in digital? Because the possibilities are endless and your resources as a person are limited. So how do you determine how can I use this that gives me the biggest value? Who can answer that one first?
And maybe because it's a bit more in my area, maybe.
Yes. Great, Axel.
I happen to be a marketeer, but what I typically do is just test, and test means, for example, I want to attract, let's say, more influencers to actually. To give you an example, I'm going to create some content that I'm going to launch on social media, maybe on TikTok, maybe on Instagram, maybe I'm going to do something on LinkedIn, because many more aspiring creators are also going on LinkedIn, and then I just test the results. Maybe I lead them to a web page, and I can just see in each platform which has the biggest CTR, where most people got actually interested in the content, and from which channel, or all different digital channels that are available, which one was the highest converting channel on the website where they registered and made an account, for example, or whatever your target is, bought a product or subscribed to the newsletter or something. So I think it's quite easy nowadays not only to do digital marketing, but also to measure the impact, because on all the social media channels, for example, you can have all the statistics just at your fingertips, and on your website or whatever you have online, there are also a plenitude or multitude of different options to measure actually what is happening there. So I think testing is an important one. Experimenting is even maybe a better word.
Yeah. And is it the same for hardware? Because Niels, you say, hardware is hard. Is it similar?
Well, it's hard to build and get hardware to market, but I think to do the marketing, we would use the same kind of tactics.
Yeah.
Also try different channels and see where most people are coming from.
Yeah. And is that then the biggest value for online, would you say, as for entrepreneurs and for startups?
What do you mean with biggest value? Just
testing, seeing what works, or is it something else?
Yeah, I think that's the key foundation to do it successfully. So it's indeed that's maybe, of course, your message, your branding, what you're trying to say to who. It begins with the foundations of your business. Who you're going to target, which kind of niche, is it niche enough? Is the niche you're targeting actually your solution is specific enough? You said indeed exactly to differ from competitors or something like that. So that's the foundation, but then you need to just get feedback. It can be feedback via like web analytics and the performance of your digital marketing efforts or any marketing efforts, or it can also be just qualitative data, feedback from customers, stuff like that. So like, ask when they buy the product, for example, where did you first hear about us? Not many people do it anymore, but it yields amazing data to determine what to do next.
Mm-hmm.
I think for us, like the value created online is more on two different fields. on the one hand, yeah, getting people to get to know your brand, join your company or community, or become a customer. That's one thing, and that's exactly, you research, you create something, you test it out, then you reiterate, create it again, go with the best results. But the other part where we try to create value is to take the offline world, so the community, the events we do, the customers we have, the products we have with customers, and bring it online to also create this connection and to continue the conversation we're having in real life. So I think it goes both ways, like getting people in, but also the people that you know, or the things you do in real life, create them in an online connection as well. So I think it's on those two fields that really the value is for us.
Okay, good to know. I also noticed in a few of discussions with you and with other entrepreneurs on Startup Stories that entrepreneurs and startups are mostly staying within Europe, considering, you know, the digital age of globalization, which facilitates postage, communication. I was wondering, is it that our ambitions are limited to that, or are the barriers too great? Or maybe, Ren, is it the similarity bias that you spoke of, that we are surrounding ourselves with people doing similar things? What do you think it is?
Well, I think it definitely has something to do with the things you know, of course, and things that are similar to what you know are easier and are more approachable. So within Europe, you're still within the Eurozone, it's still, like, legislation-wise a bit easier. If you go outside that, you have to really figure everything out. And if you haven't lived abroad, like outside of Europe, I think it's just a very big step. It's like you need to have a good size of company and a lot of budget, because you need to investigate, you need to research how the market there works, how people interact, how sales is done. And I think the further you go away, the more different the culture, the more different things are done, and you have to kind of start up all over again, because you can't just take what you're doing here, place it in a different country and expect the same results.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like launching a new business, to go abroad, really. And I think in Europe, if you start in the US, you can do the US as one country, even though there are cultural differences on the East and West Coast, of course, and North and South. But here it's per country so different in terms of laws, in terms of people, culture, that it's already a lot to cover.
Mm-hmm.
And language-wise, like, not everyone speaks perfect English here, even though here we sometimes feel like it's fine to just have an English website. It's not. And we don't realize that, I think, especially if you have the opportunity to go to a good school. Not everyone has that also in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's already a big step to cover all of the Eurozone, compared to where the US, they stay in one country, and then if they come to Europe, they're like, whoa, this is a lot, let's stay in the US. So I would say it's just, it's not one thing to do the Eurozone. I think it's a lot of countries and cultures, and a lot of big steps, and as you say, like, every step is a new company, for sure.
Yeah. I've also had my share of trying to convince American management teams of the differences just between the Netherlands and Belgium, even though we speak the same language, different culture, communication, different strategy necessary on such a small geographical area. So, yeah. But you all have very different startups, you know, sports, let's say, community and events, online services, machinery, yet I seem to have similar goals, I would say, internationally and concerning sustainability. What do you think is the reasoning for that?
That we have similar goals?
Yeah. In such different markets.
You mean sustainability-wise?
Both, and internationally as well. I felt like there were similar goals coming out of the talks. I was thinking, is it in being in Belgium as well that has an impact on how you think about sustainability, how you think about going over Europe, for example?
Well, I think per country, definitely what is important changes 100%. Where you grow up, if you grow up in Eastern Germany or in Western Germany, it's still a difference. And in terms of what you vote for and who you believe and what channels you follow, or in the US, do you follow Fox News or CNN? It's a big difference. So Yeah, of course, but I think we're all startups, and I think that's why we have a lot of similarities in the way we see things. Because you're going to market something. If it's a hardware startup or software, you need to be in that niche. You need to follow these same strategies. Really, so I think that's where we cover a lot of the same ground.
Yeah, and startups seem to be also very much in a similar network. If I hear like KBC Accelerator and other organizations that you're all involved in and see each other at least. So.
Wasn't also maybe, I don't know, of course I wasn't with you in the other thoughts, but maybe that sometimes international ambitions, if you ask me, that it was a bit limited, not limited, but for us it's more, by nature a bit more limited, I think, to have a global vision, because we're mostly service community in a sense. So I think for Belgians it's also what I see often from fellow colleague entrepreneurs, that we tend to stick maybe to Belgium too long, even that indeed that we're not daring enough to make the step. On the other hand, I said that you need to have your structure in place first in one country, but maybe it takes us too long to have that and then to look to other countries. But we have tried in the past and it was not easy. It's not an easy thing to do.
I was actually wondering, maybe being in Belgium, being in in the local the position of Belgium in Europe, does that give you kind of an automatic push to go European wide, do you think?
Maybe Belgium is, we're just a small country, so I think just market-wise, especially talking about like being in a niche and needing this niche to start up a business, you often very quickly need to go outside of Belgium just to have enough customers, for example. Depending on how niche you are and your customers are, of course, but I think that's probably one of the incentives, is we're just a very small country, so like before you know it, you're in the Netherlands and you're an international company, but
if you do the
just
French,
a 1 hour drive, so.
If you do the French, if you're French-speaking client, then France is open, and if you're Dutch-speaking clients, then the Netherlands is open. So that's for us at least something that typically happens. But still quite different countries, although the same language. I can definitely vouch for what you said earlier.
Yeah. I was wondering, is it also something that investors look for in your business plans, in your strategy? Like, how are you going to go outside of Belgium?
We don't have that much experience with investors yet, because we were more pre-seed phase. So I can't tell, but I think the first thing they ask, like, how big is your customer base and where are they? And if your customer base in Belgium is too small, and then the immediate question would be, I think, and how do you go abroad? So yeah, that immediately pops up. So
typically, if you're doing seed investments, like indeed when you're building your product, typically what they hope for is the hockey stick, and the hockey stick is mostly achieved through indeed international expansion of reaching your niches and convincing your niche audiences in different countries. And there are few, let's say, not service-based companies that indeed, therefore, if they're looking for investors, tell the story, we're only going to operate in Belgium. For example, that was also not our initial story. For example, we said we're going to take the globe, and we convinced them nonetheless. So, and afterwards we said the opposite. But okay.
All right. I'm just wondering, we're talking about sustainability and growth. What is the link there for you, either as an entrepreneur or as a startup?
It's a tough one. Like I talked about resources earlier, so you have physical limits, but in a certain way we also have to grow to replace polluting products. But once you're there, you need to make sure that your product is already sustainable. So you don't keep growing and growing, then you end up in the same situation as these people that are there right now. So you definitely need to start from zero and think, okay, in 50 years, if this takes over, will this still be a sustainable product or not? Will this still be viable? Will this still be circular? Will this be possible? So for example, right now we use wood from the local forest here in Libels. Well, you can't do that for the Libels market, So it's a tough one. So can you source wood even at scale in a sustainable way? And that is something you need to think about early on. If you really want to see it that far and in the future. And that's a lot of thinking that goes into that.
Yeah, indeed. It's something I also need to consider. At this point in time, I would like as much companies as possible to buy my machine, but this is not sustainable, because then you're still in the linear model of I need to sell as many products as I can, and then you're also consuming as much as resources as you can. But in the long term, we're thinking about transitioning to machine as a service kind of product, where we rent the machine to customers. And if the customer doesn't need it anymore, or it's end of life, we take it back and we reuse or recycle all of the materials that are still possible to reuse. But yeah, in the beginning it's hard. You need to find some kind of balance of I need to sustainably financially grow, and I also need to try to be sustainable as in the way my business is. So, but it's difficult.
100%. An investor also, they haven't thought that far, a lot of them, even impact investors, they're not thinking ahead a lot of the time. And I sometimes ask them the question, so what when you're big? And they're like, well, I never really thought about this. So they are impact investors, they're VC investors, and they still don't know, like, oh, what is my impact? So I want to have a good impact, but I don't really know what happens once I exit this company. They just look at the return. They're like, oh, this is green, great. 5 years, return, done. And they don't really think, okay, this is a really big company. Is it better than what there is today? And so that's something I think is very important to align on with your investor as well.
It's the fundamental of capitalism and investors, and how everybody thinks, banks think, investors think. So as long as they are sticking to the model that you just described, change will be very hard regardless of entrepreneurs, because of course they are the provider of resources for us to do things that we want to achieve, or achieve things that we want to achieve.
Gonna need some big changes.
To the government, to the European Union.
That brings us to the end of our discussion time. Thank you to our entrepreneurs for coming in today and talking to us. Thank you so much, Axel, Ren, Niels, Jasper, thank you. Thank you to the audience for listening. We hope you've gotten inspired. If you have any questions or feedback, or if you want to take part in our podcast, please reach out to us through the Value Network channels. Thank you and have a great day.